Hey guys, today's Dale's tool of the day is this Lotos plasma cutter. So we've had a few of these over the years. We're just working on this table project, and I got to cut some plates off here, and I thought, oh, I should show you guys this plasma cutter.
Tools are cool. Tools are cool. Tools are cool. Dale's tool of the day.
So we've had this one. I'm not sure how long we've had this one. So we've had several. Actually, when I was digging out behind the cabinet, I found where I'd stored all the ones that have gone off to die. And all that's really wrong with those ones is one circuit board on each of them. We've had a few over the years, and there's a circuit board that's for like the arc start, and maybe we're using it wrong, maybe something's up, maybe it's just a weak link in them, but we've burned up a few of those. But we burned those up in a professional weld shop where we were using these things all day, every day to cut all sorts of stuff, and never anything that's dirty or not good paint. And with wet air, we haven't, I've always heard that you're supposed to use an air dryer, and out at the new shop we finally got a good air dryer in that system, and maybe that contributed to it. The first plasma cutter that I ever used was in a welding shop when I was like 16 back in Idaho. They had a newfangled fancy thing called a plasma cutter. I'd never seen one before. This was back in the mid 90s. And it was a hypertherm, and it worked really good. It was pretty cool. And so I didn't have one for a long time when I was welding, and then I moved up here, and we were doing a bunch with sheet metal, and I was using the skill saw to do it. And man, that gets old, and you go through a lot of blades. So my buddy Juan was like, hey, why don't you get a plasma cutter? So, we hopped in the truck and drove back into town because I didn't even know Amazon was a thing back then. And we went to the welding supply store, and I had two options, a hypertherm or a thermal dynamics. And the hypertherm was like $5,000, and the thermal dynamics was like $2,000. And I was like, ooh, I don't want to drop $5,000 right now. So I got the thermal dynamics, and I don't know if the one that I got was a lemon or what its deal was, but we had problems right out the gate with that one. In fact, I was going to take it back because I didn't think it worked. And what had happened was I would always, if it was cold in the shop, if it wasn't real hot, and I live in North Dakota, so the shops aren't always very warm, you would have to actually sit there, and it would like kind of pulse, and you'd make a little cut, and then you'd have on a piece of scrap metal until it finally warmed up enough that it would strike an arc and go. And man, we fought that thing for years. And I used it for probably 10 years because it was $2,000. It was expensive, I didn't want to go to something different. I didn't want to spend a bunch more money on a plasma cutter. And it made a really good cut, but we always struggled with it warming up. And, so, over the years, we dropped a lot of stuff on the cord and the hose for it. And, a little bit of electrical tape later, and it'd be back working. And, that might have led to part of its demise. That cord was really toast by the time I got rid of that plasma cutter. But to get a new one, the whole whip for it and everything was like $1,000 for the thing, plus the consumables for it. So plasma cutters go through consumables. This Lotos takes this style of consumables. It's got an inner and an outer consumable. Like, it creates an arc between these, and air goes through there, and it makes lightning, and it shoots out really hot jet of plasma, and it'll cut through stuff. It'll conduct electricity, and then you can, you still got to ground your metal, and it'll just make a pretty good cut. Well, the consumables for that thermal dynamics, man, for an 80 amp unit, I was about $25 for an inner and outer tip. And this Lotos, well, first of all, the Lotos, the first one that I bought back, I don't know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, a while ago, it was like $500 back then. Granted, they've gone up. Everything's gone up since then. But it was like $500. I couldn't buy the replacement cord for that thermal dynamics for the cost of this Lotos. Now, does this Lotos make as good of a quality a cut as that thermal dynamics did? No, it really doesn't. It makes a really good cut. And for, a hobby shop, even for my small welding shop, dude, it works great, honestly. And we've used the ton out of it. Like I say, we're on like the fifth one here in this shop probably. But that's over 9 years of using it almost daily. Out at the other shop, I've got one that we've been using for a couple years now, and it hasn't burned up yet. I think the dry air really does help, having an air dryer in the system. Um, but I like these Lotos brand. They've done me pretty good. I've got some 50 ampers that I put on my trucks that I run off of my engine-driven welders. I've got a couple 80 ampers that have a different style tip, more like what the Hypertherm had or the Thermal Dynamics had, I guess. But yet again, the tips are getting more expensive. Like these tips, $1.50 to replace the tips. That is so much cheaper than the Thermal Dynamics or even the other Lotos that has that style of consumable. It's a lot more expensive. But I'm planning on putting that on my plasma table when I get it going, because it's supposed to be better at piercing and make a better cut. Hopefully, we'll see. I haven't used that one very much yet because I haven't got my plasma table done. That's one of the projects that I really got to get to, and I'll get there. But anyhow, enough gabbing. I'm gonna cut these off real quick here. I had these gusset plate things underneath on our metal rack back when this was my welding shop. And then when I turned it into my workbench, I just left them because it's a little more support for the workbench, but I don't have near enough weight on this workbench to require them. And they're in the way. They're in the way of doing this table project that we're doing, so I'm going to chop them off real quick. Ooh. So there's the cut, guys. It's not the worst. It works pretty good. This one was up at an angle, so it kind of beveled, but it works. And then I cut this one off. It does all right, If I were to hit that with a little bit of sander, it'd look beautiful in a heartbeat. You always get that layer of slag with torching and plasma cutting. But with the plasma cutter, you can usually take like a chisel or something, run along, and it'll just knock right off and be beautiful. You hit it with a hammer, tap it. There's lots of different ways. But it does a pretty good job. Yeah, here's the pile of old Lotuses that I've had. And like I say, they still fire up. They just aren't real happy about it. I gotta see if I can get somebody to fix those circuit boards or something. Maybe I'm a hoarder. Maybe I should just chuck these. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fix those one of these days. So we'll see about that. So these Lotos plasma cutters, they've got this little thing called a chariot, and it works pretty good. It's got these little roller wheels, and it just clamps onto the body of the plasma cutter. And then you can measure your offset from the wheel to the center, mark your line for where you want to cut, and cut along it. Put a straight edge on or any sort of a guide. If you're going to cut a curve like over and over again, you can make a template and just run right along it. It works pretty good. Then it makes it a lot easier just to cut a straight line. Well, that's been Dale's tool of the day. Remember, me and Jesus love you. Talk to you later.